Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and today, as we celebrate the birth of our nation, we're taking a moment not to just reflect on fireworks and freedom, we love those things, but on the deeper spiritual legacy of America. And joining us is a man who's devoted his life to research, storytelling, and faith-filled history, nationally known speaker and best-selling author, William Federer. As president of Amerisearch Inc., William has spent decades uncovering our country's noble heritage through his American Minute Daily radio feature, TV appearances, books, and speaking engagements across the nation. Wow. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Hey, Keith. Great to be with you.
Yes. So, William, many people know about the political vision of the Founding Fathers, but how central was their spiritual worldview to what they were building?
Yeah, a great question. One of the things I do in one of my books, Who is the King in America? I look at all world history, and the most common form of government is kings. Nimrod, Pharaoh, Caesar, Kaiser, Sultan, Tsar. And as the centuries go on, the kingdoms get bigger. Because with the latest military advancement, the king can kill more people, right? So instead of killing people with a rock, they kill with a bronze weapon, iron weapon, big long failing spear that Alexander the Great's men had, and scimitar sword the Muslims had. And with technological advancements, kings can track more people. Augustus Caesar, 2 BC, wanted a worldwide tracking system called the census. If he could have had access to 5G and cell phones and facial recognition software, he'd probably have been tempted to use that. Until finally the King of England had the biggest. The sun never set on the British Empire. India, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong. The King of England was a globalist. He was a one world government guy with him at the top. America's founders didn't like that. They broke away and flipped it and made the people the king. So kings have subjects who are subjected to their will. Republics have citizens. And the word citizen is Greek. It means co-ruler, co-sovereign, co-king. We pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic. We're pledging allegiance to us being in charge of ourselves. And then where did the founders get these ideas? Little ancient Rome, ancient Greece, but ultimately ancient Israel. And so the New England, the Puritans and Pilgrims and whatever, they studied the first 400 years out of Egypt before Israel got a king. It's this anomaly from around 1400 BC to 1000 BC. Millions of Israelites, and everybody's taught the law, personally accountable to God to follow it. It's really the first instance in world history where you have millions of people and no king. And it worked until the priests went woke and there's no more sin. And Eli, the high priest, his own sons are sleeping with women in the tent of meeting. And they all go to Samuel the prophet. They say, the self-government system's not working anymore. We want to be like the other countries. We want a king. Why is this important? The kings of England look to the Bible for their authority, but they look to the King Saul and on part of the Bible. I'm the divinely appointed royal gang leader, right? And the Pilgrims, the Puritans, and other ones that founded New England look to the pre-King Saul part of the Bible, right? And so the covenant form of government, the word federal is Latin for covenant, and it was a flip. Instead of top down by kings, it's bottom up by we the people. And so one of the things I did is I studied every colony was started by a different Christian denomination. Virginia was Anglican, Massachusetts was Puritan, Rhode Island was Baptist, Maryland was founded by Catholics. Connecticut, New Jersey were founded by Congregationalists. New York by Dutch Reformed. Delaware and New Jersey were originally Swedish Lutheran. Then they got taken over by the Dutch and then taken over by the British. And then Pennsylvania was Quaker. And the Quakers, William Penn, said, hey, we're going to try an experiment. We're going to see if people of different denominations can live together in the same geographic area. It's like, really? It's like, and so Philadelphia became the place where everyone felt comfortable going to write the Declaration. I mean, the first English-speaking church, the first English-speaking Catholic church in the world after the Reformation was St. Joseph's Church in Philadelphia in the 1730s. And they even allowed a synagogue. And so they all felt comfortable coming there. And so they, we're going to open with prayer at the First Continental Congress, 1774. And the Anglicans didn't want to hear a prayer by the Presbyterians. They didn't want to hear a prayer by the Baptists. And it was about to fall apart. And Sam Adams stands up and he goes, I'm no bigot. I can hear a prayer of any man of piety who at the same time is a patriot of our nation. They get Reverend Jacob Duché to come. He gives this extemporary prayer, and it stirs the bosom of every man present. And there's reports of them kneeling and even tears in their eyes. And they read Psalm 35, Lord, fight against my enemies, fight against me. And so our country was birthed out of this idea that we don't all get along religiously all the time, but none of us are happy with the king burning people at the stake. So let's work together, and then afterwards we can all have the freedom. And so Charles Carroll was the one Catholic that signed the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
You get a little background. The British drove the Catholics out of Acadia, Canada, called the Great Expulsion. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote the epic poem Evangeline. So these French Catholics were forced to go to Louisiana, and the word Acadian got pronounced Cajun.
Huh.
And so Charles Carroll and his family were corresponding with the King of France, saying, "Hey, we're thinking of moving all the Catholics out of Maryland to Louisiana." But then when the Revolution starts, they all team up and join together. And so John Carroll, the first bishop in America, travels with Ben Franklin and others to Canada to see if they join us in the Revolution. They don't. But John Carroll makes such a great impression that the rest of the founders are like, we need to give the Catholics freedom. And so John Carroll in 1790 writes to the Vatican, and it says, prior to the Revolution, Catholics were only allowed in 2 colonies, Pennsylvania and Maryland. He says, but we all joined together in the same cause, and now there's freedom. And so George Washington writes a letter to John Carroll after the Revolution, and of course he founded Georgetown, and he said that may the members of your community enjoy all the freedoms, and so this was a new thing for the world that was taking place in America. And so the founders had this faith. One thing they all agreed on was that we have rights from a creator, not from the king, and the government's job is to guarantee to us our creator-given rights. So instead of the government being an enforcer of the king's will, the government is to guarantee to the citizens their creator-given rights. And so that's one of the things I always like to bring out when we talk, Declaration of Independence time.
Wow, that is so fascinating. Now, kind of fast forward to today, how would you assess the spiritual health of our nation right now in 2025? Are there any parallels to earlier chapters in our history?
I think we're experiencing a revival. Young men are among the highest demographic going back to church. I think this new pope is like an answer to a lot of people's prayers. I see that we're seeing a resurgence that it's okay. I was even reading a quote from J.K. Rowling. She's the author of the Harry Potter. And she was like sort of on the, liberal side for a while, with it. But she came out for children being male or female, and she got canceled. And then just today, the person that was like causing her a lot of problems got, sentenced to prison for abusing children. And so she says, look, I just don't believe that you should, do hysterectomies on little 8-year-old girls and castrate little boys because they played with their sister's dolls, Right. I think people are pushing back against the woke agenda and realizing, wait a second, let's have some common sense. But it goes back to faith. So when I go through the country's history, at the time of the founding, 98% of the country was Protestant, 3 million people, 1% Catholic, only 30,000 Catholic. Catholics originally were only allowed in 3 colonies, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and then a little bit in New York. And so about 30,000 Catholics, and only 3,000 Jews, only 7 synagogues in the whole country. But then you have an Irish potato famine. The Irish were being persecuted for centuries by the Anglicans in England. They would they'd get their armies and go kill, and they sold about 500,000 of them into slavery. And so in the 1600s, more Irish Catholics were sold into slavery than Africans. African slavery was really the 1700s and then the 1800s. But anyway, so the Irish potato famine, millions of Irish Catholics come to America, and the Catholic percentage goes from 1% to 20% in a decade. Now, there's in some of the Protestant states, there's backlash, and there's loggerheads, and there's fighting, and they stone the Archbishop's house in New York, John Hughes, and he decides to pull all the Catholic students out of the public schools, which were Protestant, and he started the parochial school system. And then you had the Sisters of St. Joseph starting hospitals across America. And so it made such a big impact that the nurse's hat that they used to wear, that distinctive hat, came from the nun's habit. And there was an 1849 cholera epidemic. And the Sisters of St. Joseph, running the hospitals in St. Louis, took care of the sick. And like 1 out of every 4 of the nuns died taking care of it. But they did it out of love for the Lord. And so the first hospital like west of the Mississippi was by the Sisters of St. Joseph. And then you had St. Vincent de Paul, right? He had been captured by the Muslims in Europe and then made a slave. And then he witnessed to one of his slave master's wives, and she began to nag her husband to let him go. He goes back to France, and the Queen of France gives him money, and he starts a hospital. And so it starts this order of hospitals across Europe, and then they started St. Vincent de Paul hospitals in America. Matter of fact, 8 of the 10 largest hospital corporations in America were originally started by Catholics. And so this was sort of a ministry that took place, and so you began to see this trend. The angels of the battlefield during the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln asked the nuns to follow the army and take care of the wounded. And so there's a monument in Washington, D.C. to the angels of the battlefield, these sisters that did that. And so it's a great heritage that we have in America. But the people that founded the country were people of faith. And they learned how to work together and then give freedom to each other. And then it turned into this, out of all the world's history, more individual freedom and opportunity. And instead of it being a top-down form of government, it's a bottom-up form of government. It's we the people, government from the consent of the governed. So it's fascinating history, and I love to talk about it and put it in my books. Matter of fact, AmericanMinute.com is my website, and I send out history emails to go through stories of Lewis and Clark and, Kit Carson and the Battle of the Bulge over in Europe and Apollo 13. But I always try to weave in faith somewhere in there. So, you had the Battle of the Bulge, in Europe in the winter of 1944. And the American 101st Airborne is pinned down at Bastogne, and Patton's coming to the rescue with a Third Army, but he can't move because the rain is so bad. So he gets his chaplain, James O'Neill, who's a Catholic priest, and says, compose a prayer to God. We need to get God's help. And he's like, well, I don't know if we can do that. He says, well, you can figure it out. And so he writes this prayer: Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we beseech thee to restrain these immoderate rains. Hearken to us as soldiers to call upon thee. Establish thy justice among men and nations. Printed on 250,000 index cards with Patton's Christmas greeting to his troops on the flip side. They pray it. The next day, the sky clears. His army marches. They come to the rescue of the 101st Airborne, and the Nazis run out of gas, and they have to go back. And 2 months later, the World War II is over. And so, but it's these little bitty inserts of faith that I find so fascinating that, the secular historians try to leave it out, but I think it's time that we bring it back.
Oh, I appreciate that you're doing that. So kind of lastly here, what gives you hope when it comes to the future of the Catholic faith in America?
Well, I think returning to the founding, returning to the traditions, returning to the scriptures, the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit indwells us and keeps us on fire for the Lord. Gives us insight into the scriptures and speaks to our heart. I think that this is an exciting time to be alive. We don't know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. The apostles were looking up, and the angels said, the same Jesus that you saw go up will return in like manner. So, at some point he's going to come back. But I think we're the bride of Christ. And I think every romance novel builds up to what? A decision-making moment. a forsaking of all others and choosing the one. So in a sense, maybe God is pushing the world to a decision-making moment. And some people are going to choose the all others. They're going to want to be liked and friended and followed, and they'll, it's like J.K. Rowling. I mentioned her already. It's a moving goalpost to try to please the world. And so she said, okay, I'm not going to go anymore. Well, the goalpost moved and they got rid of her. Well, someday that goalpost is going to move till it's like, oh, we're going to tolerate Satan. And some people, yeah, we got to tolerate. It's like, I'm sorry, I draw the line here. I don't tolerate Satan, right? Don't tolerate Satan statues in the Iowa State Capitol, or Satan worshiping Grammys, or Satan trans clothes designers for Target. It's like, okay, I'm drawing the line here. I'm not in favor of castrating little boys or hysterectomies on little girls. And it's like God's pushing the world to this decision-making moment. And we're free will beings. And so he's like, I'm not going to force you. You're not a robot, but I'm going to make the choice real clear. God, devil, choose. And though some people will choose the all others, I think more and more people are choosing Jesus, and it's exciting. And so when you look back at history, you see it's people of faith that have made key differences throughout the world. There's 4 Chaplains Day. During World War II, there were 4 chaplains on a ship. There was 2 Protestants, a Catholic, and then a Jewish chaplain. And they didn't have enough life preservers, so the chaplains take off their life preservers and put them on 4 sailors, and then the last they were seen was they're hugging each other and praying as the ship goes down, and so they created a holiday, in the Navy for 4 Chaplains Day. But again, it's this idea that God has used people of faith, and in particular people that believe in Jesus, to make a big impact in our country and in the world. And this is just our turn. I think someday you'll be dead and in heaven, and you'll be talking to Moses and Gideon and David, and they'll be telling all their great stories, and then they'll say, tell us your story. And it's like, I'd hate for somebody to, well, maybe I threw a couple dollars in the offering plate. It's like, I didn't tell you what they were doing when I was alive. They were killing little kids, and I said I couldn't sit back, and whether I turn it around or not, at least I'm going to try. So.
That's a great perspective. Yeah, what did you do? Well, I doom scrolled for a while. So yeah, that does give some perspective. But my goodness, thank you so much, William, for joining us this morning. For those out there listening, if you'd like to learn more about William's work or pick up one of his excellent books, make sure to visit AmericanMinute.com. All of this will be in the show notes. But once again, thank you so much, William.
Thank you, Keith.
William, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We could literally talk all day long here about this. But hey, if you do want to hear the full conversation, just head on over to our YouTube channel at GRN Online. Again, that's GRN Online on YouTube. We've got the extended version posted there. But for those staying for the Holy Mass coming up next, please keep us all in your prayers. We will continue to keep you and your intentions in ours. God bless. Make it a joyful holiday weekend and a blessed 4th of July, a safe one too. And we'll see you bright and early Monday morning, 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern, right here on Morning Joy, where truth matters. We'll see ya.